Sudhanshu Palsule is an author and award-winning educator, specially recognized for his work in leadership and transformation. He is visiting faculty at Duke University, the Helsinki School of Economics, and the Indian School of Business. He is the author of several books including Managing Four Worlds and The Ecology of Organizations. Over the years, he has worked with several Fortune 500 companies and facilitated many life-changing conversations with senior leaders on questions about what really matters. Is there a certain age in life when these questions become more important?
Yes, the answer is yes. There's one stage in life where these questions and this quest becomes paramount, becomes an obsession, and that is what we call midlife. Classically, I think we have always been talking about the 40s as a start of a new time in life. In the last 2.5 years that I've been coming back and working here, I find young men and women who are 36, 37 years old displaying the same symptoms of midlife that I would not have imagined to exist at this stage, and I would probably have expected them at the age of 45.
And why is it happening now?
I think the stress levels at work are just going through the roof. There's a lot of material benefit that is coming in, the stress is killing, and this is causing people to stop and ask that question much earlier. What am I doing with my life? You know, I call it the freeway moment. It's
What's the freeway moment?
The highway moment, or the motorway moment. You're driving back Wednesday night from work. You've had a really awful 3 days at work, back-to-back meetings, next quarter's results coming up, and you haven't seen your family properly for a long time, and you're sitting in your car at 8:30 in the night, you're stuck in a traffic jam, and you're looking out through the windscreen, and there's one question that forms in your mind, and it always is the same: what am I doing with my life? And these are people who are fairly successful in many other ways. They've got the homes they want, they've got the cars they want, they've got the money they want, and yet there is that emptiness that starts happening.
What happens when that question stares you in the face? What am I doing with my life?
You know, midlife, I think, is a start of the journey back home.
Okay.
Okay.
So home meaning back to self?
Home meaning back to self, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I've often felt this. I've often felt that somebody in their 20s has completely different needs to somebody in their 40s. What are the prime needs and how do they change? What are the prime needs at 20 in your 20s and what are the prime needs in your 40s?
Right. The season that differentiates that midlife from the 20s, I think there are 4 things. There is an increased sense of urgency. There is a very, very strong need for a deeper fulfillment. There is a very powerful need for having some kind of purpose. And lastly, and this is the most difficult one, there is a very powerful drive towards integrity.
What is integrity as you mean it?
You see, for example, we've all been at stages in our lives when we've had to do something just to make a living. You don't really want to do it. It's not a job you like. It's not even something that interests you, but you do it because you have to earn some money, you got to have a living. Now, that can be handled much better when you're in your 20s or even 30s. The moment you go into your 40s and 50s, you try and do that. It's as if there is a cry from inside saying, don't do that. Because life is demanding integrity. It's asking everything to come together. So what I do at work, what my interests are, what my passion is, and what my purpose is, I want all that to come together. We go through what we call the dark night of the soul. We go through those periods of emptiness where nothing makes sense. And all those are indicators. Those are the knocks on the door that are happening, where something is saying, why are you doing this? You know, is this what you were meant for? What happened to the dream when you were 20?
Here, a lot of the things, sometimes what is really so frightening is that a lot of the things that turned you on at one stage in your life, the name and the perks and the first class travel, all of that seems like tinsel at another time.
He's an executive vice president of a Fortune 500 company, and he always wanted to become the executive VP. He used to be a senior director before that. And I said, John, what's driving you? Why do you want to get there? And he said, well, apart from all the responsibility and the one thing I want to do is I want to travel first class. I met him 2 years down the line, and I said, John, how's the first class doing? And he said, there's nowhere else to go now. And that is driving me crazy. That's the first time that he began to understand that he had been on a path for so many years of constantly trying to fill an empty life with these things. I think the two words which we need to bring back into our lives are relevance and significance.
Here's a lot about the important tasks at midlife. Psychologists have written about it. I think it was Jung who said that what worked in the morning of life no longer holds true in the afternoon of life.
Beautiful.
So what are the important tasks at midlife
Beautiful.
for somebody to take stock of, whether at work or at a personal level?
What a great question. The great Carl Jung. Jung had a wonderful, he had this incredible notion of your shadow. And that shadow is not visible in the first two stages of life, which I call youth and adulthood. So somewhere, in our 20s and our 30s, we're not really conscious of that shadow. And it starts emerging as a real thing as we enter that midlife. And what Jung calls upon to do is to embrace that shadow, which truly means to embrace that which we have denied up until now. Because up until now, you've almost created this image of denying that, because you're supposed to be this tough alpha male that who gets his results by being tough. And here we are saying, that's only one half of you. You haven't embraced the other half. And if you don't do it now,
then
this
when?
half is going to start getting dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess the big question is, if not now, then when?
Yes.
That's
If
the
not now, when?
big midlife question.
In some of the European languages, it literally means a second opportunity. It's also the last chance. It's the last chance to truly become who you're meant to be, is to watch how everything that you held precious no longer makes sense. Watch it fall away, and to start letting go step by step of each one of those things. And I think out of that process is born something new, something extraordinary, something creative. To me, this is really the beginning of a creative process.
Like one world over another waiting to be born. Going back to midlife, how does your relationship with success change at that time? And how does your relationship with time change? And how does your relationship with money change?
Yeah.
Because I imagine all of these would probably shift.
They do big time. The important thing, as we mentioned a little earlier, is not that the relationship changes, that will change, but in acknowledging that that relationship is changing, and in being able to hold that state of transition between something that made a lot of sense at one time and now it's no longer making that sense. And you're in a state of transition because you don't know what's going to make sense. You don't know where that significance is going to come from. And it's to operate in that state of emptiness for a while, which is critical. And what I find is that most people don't want to do that, and so they end up doing more of what made sense before. Even if it doesn't make sense now, you just do more of it. So you've been earning a lot of money, it's no longer making sense, but you don't want to acknowledge that. You don't want to put up with the shock of discovering that what you've been doing for the last 20 years is no longer that significant. So what do you end up doing? You go back right there and start doing even more of it. And that denial, I think, drives people nuts.
And in closing, since we have been talking about midlife, Is there a way to turn this very disturbing time into a time of great positive potential?
I think we need to consciously stop calling it a crisis. I think we consciously need to embrace it as an opportunity, as a time, as a chance, as life presenting itself one more time with open arms, saying, "Come take me."
When you turned 40, did you want to get a little red convertible? Because that's where the cliche goes. You either change your wife or your job, and you definitely change your car.
You can quickly see through the transient nature of all those things, and however appealing something might be, you realize that it's all passing, it's transient. One of the things that develops in the brain as we get older is you start looking for gratification from things that sustain themselves for a longer period of time, because the car is definitely not that. Right. So the question is, what is that one thing, or what are those three things that has a long shelf life, that in fact gets better and better the more you do it? And I think it is one of them. I don't know what all the answers are, but one of them definitely is when one finds one's vocation, or responding to one's calling. That the call that's been there from the time I was young, the dream that you had when you were 21 years old, can you go back to that? And that's what I call the return home. Midlife is your soul crying out for attention. Those who take that step and cross the threshold and open up to that invitation which is coming, they discover an extraordinary energy.
And how did you unleash this extraordinary energy that's driving you?
I don't know where it's coming from, but I think it is a natural sequel to wanting to live a life in which, go back to those two things. I want to love what I do, and I want to be great at what I do, and I want to stop doing everything else.
Yeah. Okay. Get rid of the inessentials so the essential can speak.
You find that everything you do just becomes more significant, more real, and you can end up doing things that you would not have imagined doing before. I'm at a stage of life now where I can walk up to a beautiful woman at an airport and say, "You look very beautiful," and get away with it. So yes, that is a wonderful way to live, yeah, where you can actually be completely authentic.
So it's a good age, 51?
Great age.
So is this better than being in the 20s? Young and out there and partying and everything stretching out in front of you. Now a lot of things stretching out behind you.
Don't tell me you ever want to go back to that time of the 20s again.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to go back there. Who was it who said youth is wasted on the young? Yeah. And he or she was probably very, very right. So every moment I live now has to be significant. The bird is born twice. Once when it comes out of its egg, and the second time when it learns to fly. And I think here there is a real possibility of that flight taking place.